guys, I'm Linda.
And I'm Vicky.
And we are Partners in Crime. Today we're going to talk about Susan Powell and the Cold podcast. So this is focusing on episode 3, which is faith and finances. Susan did start complaining about Josh to anyone that would listen. In a message to a Facebook friend, she said he's mainly emotionally, verbally, and financially abusive. Basically, I'm a single mother who lives with this guy that dictates to me what I can do in my spare time and takes my paycheck and spends the money. Josh would mock her faith, chastise her about spending money, call her names, and refuse to touch her for months at a time. So then he started to demean her even more by calling her names and that sort of thing, and then took away his affection towards her. So that's another way of controlling her as well.
Yeah.
Susan thought she was going crazy. She thought Josh was bipolar like his brother John, who did live in a group home. So he did have major problems, apparently, his brother John. So she thought maybe he was having those same issues. Obviously, he wouldn't do anything about it if she did bring it up.
Right.
Susan and Josh fought about everything. But Susan didn't look like a victim of abuse because she didn't have any external cuts or bruises or anything like that. And that's what a lot of, when you do go to therapy, there's just as many abused women that don't have any physical abuse. It's all emotional and mental and, you know.
Well, she did realize that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she did mention to her friends how abusive he was.
It's nice that she finally started to wake up and thought, this is not the way I'm supposed to live.
Right.
Her parents did give her a cell phone in secret just to use in case she needed to get out. So that says something too. She can't even use a cell phone. He has it, but she can't use one. Josh did buy a car for Susan to drive, but in his name alone, saying that he needed to rebuild his credit. But then he sold his car and they only had one car again. So just playing games. Josh then has Susan get life insurance for $500,000. Then they bumped it up to $1 million, and of course he was the sole beneficiary. He also took out $1 million policy on him and $250,000 policies on his sons. Susan's friends said that she was worth more dead than alive. Susan thought he might even have her killed. And her, again, biking to work, it would be easy for him to just bump her off, and she did fear for her safety.
She did a video. I don't know if it came up here.
Mm-hmm.
But there was like a video journal that she did that she said.
Yes, that was in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put some of that in our video so you'll see. She was documenting their assets. She hoped they would all be happy and okay, but she sounded very defeated in the video.
She did. What really made me pay attention to that was the fact that she was so adamant about if anything would happen to her.
Mm-hmm.
So she had mentioned earlier that in case he did anything to her, he could do something to her.
Yeah.
So it was just, to me, that was very powerful, that video that she made.
Yep. So then Josh did finally get a full-time job, and they needed to put the boys into daycare. So they found this woman, Debbie Caldwell, and Josh left Debbie about 30 messages. And she was just like, 30 messages? She did make an appointment with them, though. So winds up that they get there an hour and a half late, which is the way Josh works.
Mm-hmm.
Susan did pull Debbie aside and asked her if she would keep the spot for the boys if she had to change her work hours, because she did say she was thinking of divorce and she did go to a lawyer. So she did tell Debbie this the first time that she met her.
Mm-hmm.
Susan wrote a last will and testament at work, and on Saturday, well, when she was at work on a Saturday, and she did leave it there, she did leave a lot of information at work regarding the problems that she was dealing with and the fears that she had. So she kept all of this at work and did not want, she did write on there for Josh, her husband, not to be able to see any of this information. It's because of him that she's keeping this. She said there's an extreme turmoil in their marriage, and she wanted to make sure there was a paper trail at work. Like I said, Josh threatened to skip the country, and if they do get a divorce, he said there will be no lawyers, just a mediator, and he will ruin her. Her life will be over, and the boys will grow up without a mother and father. So that's actually what happened. She said if anything happens to her, to talk to her sister-in-law, Jenny Graves, her friend Kiersey Hallowell, check her blogs on MySpace. She said check her work desk and talk to her family, co-workers, and friends. So she did talk to a lot of people about this. And I guess MySpace, maybe he didn't see any of that.
I guess.
Because he would have told her to take it down. Or
Right. And I don't know, maybe he couldn't get into it even if he knew she had it.
Right.
So, I don't know.
The day before Susan wrote the will, her and Josh had a horrible fight. So that's what prompted her to say, oh my gosh, she went to work and she's like, I gotta put something down in writing. Josh complained about her spending too much and made her memorize the grocery store ads. Then she asked why he could spend anything he wanted when she could not. He told her it was none of her business. So this was part of that big argument. So he's making her memorize the store ads so she could save 2 cents at this other store that'll cost her $1 just to go to. She did tell Linda and other co-workers about all the information she left on her desk, so at least they knew where it all was. Josh and Susan did take a month off to take a trip to Washington. On the drive home, they had to stay at a motel, and they didn't really specify what happened with this trip. Apparently his dad was with them, and Susan they had to spend the night at a hotel. Maybe they were following each other, and she said, I am not staying in that room with Steve. So she slept in her car. Steve, of course, turned it around and said she couldn't stay in the room because she couldn't show how attracted she was to him. He wrote in his journal, this is what he said. She was afraid of her own overwhelming sexual attraction to him.
What a sicko.
Yeah.
Jeez.
When they got back from the trip, Susan thought things were getting better and backpedaled to her friends the things that she was saying about Josh. Susan did say that Josh still didn't hold hands or kiss, but they were okay in the bedroom. So affection wasn't good, but he could do the other.
Well, yeah, and you do wonder about that because she had 2 kids.
Yeah. Well, so, I guess to him that wasn't as emotional. Maybe the kissing and the holding hands is a very emotional thing for him.
Right.
He didn't want to go there because of it keeps them wondering what's wrong with them.
Right.
But this is something he can do because it's all about him, I guess, at that point. Josh did give her little concessions to keep her on the hook. Josh would hardly ever let Susan drive the minivan, like I said, in harsh weather. She did have to carpool, or he would drive her in. If Josh drove her in, he would sometimes not be there to pick her up or the boys from daycare. So Debbie, the babysitter, said on many occasions she would have to go pick Susan up at work and had the boys in the car and then take them home because she wanted to get on with her evening.
Right.
And in September of 2009, Susan told a friend she wished Josh would just cheat on her to make it easy for them to just part ways, which didn't happen. Susan did start showing her independence. She would make Josh watch the boys, and then she'd go out on a night with the girls to a movie or that sort of thing. She did write in the journal that she did freeze their Capital One credit card so he couldn't use it anymore. So she is starting, and she did give $50 to her parents every paycheck just to pay them back for the money that they gave her. Susan did think she might be pregnant in June. She said she had symptoms of feeling sick and stretching and that sort of thing. She did get a pregnancy test, but she was not pregnant. She just didn't know what was going on. She had all these symptoms, and her coworkers kept saying, why don't you get a different blood test? Yeah, they checked for pregnancy. That isn't happening, so there must be something wrong. And they kept asking her to do this. This leads me to believe, was there something...
Was he poisoning her?
Yeah. I think that's where what they might be thinking.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah, unless she had some other issue. But, they kept pressing her to do something, and she just wouldn't. Now, Josh continued to obviously talk to his family, and Susan would just cringe anytime he was talking on the phone, especially to his father. And for some reason, she said he'd keep the phone on speaker, and even they'd be on the phone for hours, and sometimes they wouldn't talk for a long time. He just needed to be on the phone with them, and he sounded like he needed to be a part of their day. And she knew that he was probably talking to them because he'd be swearing. Josh would be swearing or talking inappropriately, and the boys were around, so she didn't like that. She did notice a big difference whenever he was talking to his dad, which makes sense.
Right.
Susan's friend Amber Hardman overheard a conversation with Josh and his father. The boys were sitting on Josh's lap, and Josh was saying their mom was evil because she made them go to church. He said Susan was an evil person and the boys didn't need to listen to her or go to church. All this was said while Josh was talking to his dad, and it seemed like to Amber, Steve was actually the one dictating what Josh should say to them. So Susan was so mad that she took the boys and went on a drive for an hour. She's like, how dare you talk to the boys about me in front of your father too, like that. And then when they went for the drive, her friend was with her, and she was so worried that Josh would do something because she left with the boys for the hour. So she was so concerned. And her friend's like, you can do this. You were mad. Blow some steam. Don't worry about it. But she was just so worried because this is the way he made her.
I wonder if her friend encouraged her to leave.
I would if I was her friend.
Yeah, I mean, they knew the history. They knew what was going on. She's fearing for her life.
Yeah, but then it gets better. And this is just the pattern that abuse happens.
I had a friend who was going through a really nasty time. Kind of like, her husband wasn't threatening to kill her, but there were good times and there were bad times. There were good times and there were bad times. And her therapist said, make a list. Make a list of all the good things. Make a list of all the bad things. She said, because you tend to only focus on the good things. But when you see it in writing, the bad things.
And the list is this long compared to this long.
Right, it comes back to you. You're like, you just, you're not focusing on that anymore.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly, if she were a friend of mine, I would have told her, get the heck out of there.
I know a friend too, and I'm sure all of us out there probably know someone that has gone through this. Josh finally said they would go through counseling that fall, but he said he didn't want to pay for it. It had to be free, and it couldn't go through insurance or anything because that would ruin his credit. Well, your credit's ruined because you spend money and then pay it back.
Pay it back, right.
So they did go to a LDS Family Services free counseling through the church. They went for a few sessions, and then the counselor threw up their hands and I guess was so frustrated that person told them to take a month off from counseling. Josh had to focus on living his religion with a good attitude, and Susan had to keep her temper in check. So that's what they had to work on. In her head, Susan did set a date. She said if things don't get better by their anniversary, they're done. So their anniversary is in April. I believe it's in April, so I guess the next April.
And this is happening when?
This is in the winter of 2009.
Okay, so she's talking about when spring comes.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. So
Okay.
on Thanksgiving, the eve of Thanksgiving, Josh bought a torch kit from the store Air Gas. I guess they sell all these kind of tools. And he asked a lot of information about how to work it. He was assured the torch would cut through metal up to a 1/2 inch thick. He couldn't get it to work, but the gas place was closed, so he went to Lowe's to see if they could help him with the torch. And this was the day before Thanksgiving. He goes in there a half hour before they're closing. He was there a half hour after they were already closed, just taking his good old time, getting batteries and this sort of thing. So it was all about, we live in Josh's world. By the start of December, he had a torch cutting setup that would fit in the back of his van. What does he need this torch cutting machine or contraption for?
Oh, I hate to think of it. I hate to think of it.
Later, the employees at Air Gas and Lowe's said their encounters with Josh were very strange when the police talked to them. So they probably thought, what the heck does this guy
He's a strange
want
guy.
this for?
Yeah.
A couple days before he bought the torch, he went to a garden shop saying he needed tools to mend a broken tree branch. He got a roll of DeWitt brand tree wrap. The salesperson said that branch is dead. You're not going to be able to fix it by just wrapping it. It's not going to magically come back to life. And then Josh got all mad. And he did buy a 50-foot roll of this stuff. So another thing that makes you think,
Another
was
red
this a
flag.
part of
His plan, yeah.
and her disappearance?
Right.
Susan thought she was pregnant again. And then again, her friends kept saying, you gotta look into this. This just is not right. Something was definitely off with her body. She thought it might be a spider bite or something after she knew that she wasn't pregnant. The day after Thanksgiving, Susan got her period, and then she thought, well, maybe she had those issues because she miscarried early, and just because she did have spotting, she said, early. So she thought maybe I was pregnant and I miscarried. November 16th, when Josh dropped Susan off at work, he told her he loved her, which was out of character. So she just thought, I mean, she was so happy that he said that, but...
Yeah, so it's like, where did that come from?
And she said it was very hard to hear him, but she did hear him say that. Through November, Josh did go to church 3 consecutive Sundays, which was very strange, and even the neighbors noticed it. So, because their neighbors were also church members, and they did talk to one of their neighbors, and he was like, he didn't even dress for church because the men would generally wear a suit or a shirt and tie, and he always had this black leather jacket on, and he really didn't seem to respect the way people went to church. But he did go. So this is all that happened in this segment of Cold, and it does seem like maybe Susan, to me, what I read from this, Susan is starting to feel her independence. She's starting to push back on things. He's realizing, okay, this might get out of hand. She might actually leave me, and he's starting to be Mr. Nice again, to try to reel her back.
Right. And I think he's, in his head, buying all that equipment, he was preparing for something.
Yeah. And this happened in the beginning of December. So he's doing this the end of November. December is when this happens.
Right. And the fact that she gave him an ultimatum. That's in his brain, what he's thinking, so.
Yeah, and in the next segment, we do talk to the person that did see Susan the day before.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll get her take on things. And like I said, Debbie, the babysitter, also was part of what prompted authorities to look for Susan and the boys.
Right.
And Josh, because he was missing at that point as well. So, yeah.
I wonder how, her parents gave her the cell phone, so they knew there were issues. And I wonder how much she told them. Whether she told them she was afraid he was going to hurt her. And because it seems to me that her father
knew a lot.
And he would
try to
get her out of there.
Yeah. But she used to tell people things and then she'd reel it back. So at that point, are her friends and family thinking, is she just going off base all the time? Because obviously if it's that bad, she would leave them, and then she says how good things are and how she still wants a family. So because she's playing both sides as well, it was probably hard for her friends and family to actually say, okay, what is really going on and what can we believe? Because if it's that bad, you want to leave one day, but the next day you change your mind, you know.
There were so many things, such a long history of his behavior with her. So if he had a period of time that he was good and then it started all over again, then people must realize.
And sometimes people tell their friends, certain friends something, another friend something else. So you don't piece it all together either. Unless people are talking to each other, there is manipulation on the abuse part as well to try to cover up some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure she did that.
But yeah, Josh used to say she was crazy for tithing to the church, and you know, he just berated her all the time. And maybe that's what she told her friends about. Maybe she didn't really say, but this one friend, Linda, she did say that she's afraid that he's going to kill her.
Yeah. Right.
So you just don't know. And hindsight is 20/20.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And maybe things were so good right before this happened. It sounds like Josh, because we're getting close to when this did happen to Susan, maybe Josh was getting so good that red flags, you know, were put down. People weren't too worried about it because Susan was happy and she was getting what she wanted, and that could be what started all this.
Could be.
He was making things level and things weren't so bad so that he could just do away with her without anybody thinking twice about it.
And that seems to be the way that their relationship was. Even before this period of time.
Yeah.
He would build her up, and then she'd have no self-esteem again, and he'd build her up, and then you know, it was just the way that he operated with her.
Yeah. And she did have an encounter. She did go to the church, and there were some young men there, and I guess, you know, she was talking to them. They probably were flirting with her, and she did say in her journal that she does, maybe that was God's way of showing her there are other righteous men out there for her, but she just still thought Josh was the one.
Right.
So.
Right. And in the name of religion and her religious values, they were very important to her.
Right.
So she wanted to follow that.
Yeah, which is understandable.
And as far as what we know about LDS, and from hearing the situation with Lori and Chad, I think Melanie said at one point, you know, why don't you get a divorce?
Instead of...
And, you know, and I don't know if this is before Charles passed away. Yeah, I don't know. But, and she said, because we can't. We can't get a divorce. And I think that's the LDS teaching.
Yeah.
So.
Although she was divorced before that, so I don't get her logic.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, now that she was exalted in this.
Oh, there you go.
You know,
because now she's someone. Just keep diving into this because it's very fascinating. I don't know if you find it fascinating, but I'm like, so I'm listening to the podcast.
I just remember so much about this when it happened that
I didn't know that much about it.
Yeah,
so.
I just remember, and it's just hearing these details. I don't know all these details, but I do remember a lot of when it was going on. Of course, when she was missing, that's when you hear about it,
right?
And I saw that video that she made, and that was back then.
Yeah, and
it stuck with me.
Yeah.
So it's. I'd like to hear the situation and understand it better.
Yeah,
I'm sure that a lot of people do.
So, but I think we're done.
I think we're done.
Okay. So until next time. Bye.